Arthur had 17 items in his refrigerator. He had counted them once on a Tuesday afternoon in November and thought the number seemed about right for one person living alone. White bread, margarine, a half-eaten sleeve of saltine crackers on the middle shelf. 2 cans of chicken noodle soup he kept meaning to move to the pantry. A carton of instant oatmeal he ate most mornings because it was easy and it didn't upset his stomach. A small container of applesauce. Some butter. A few condiments he couldn't remember buying. Arthur was 72. He had been a school librarian for 31 years, a man who spent his career organizing information, who read widely, who prided himself on following instructions. When his doctor had told him 2 years ago to go easy on his digestive system, to keep things simple, to choose foods that were gentle, he had listened carefully and done exactly that. He had eaten his way into a nutritional void. By the time his son brought him to see me, Arthur had been experiencing what his previous doctor called normal aging, words that came and went in conversation, appointments he was sure he had written down, a heaviness in his legs going up the stairs, a fatigue that sleep did not touch. He had been tested, thyroid, iron, blood pressure, all normal, and sent home twice with the same instruction. Slow down, keep it simple, go easy. What no one had checked was what was actually in his refrigerator. Here is the thing I need you to understand. After 70, your body does not need simpler food. It needs more targeted food. The difference between those two things is measurable in cognitive test scores, in inflammatory markers, in how long you retain your strength and your independence. The foods that feel easy, the white bread, the instant oatmeal, the canned soup, are easy precisely because they have been stripped of the compounds that an aging body depends on most. And what gets stripped out is exactly what your brain and your gut and your muscle are waiting for. Today I am going to give you 10 specific foods, with the mechanism behind each one, that make the most measurable difference in the body after 70. Not a general wellness list, not a marketing term, a clinical argument for 10 specific foods, with the science that backs each one. And before we get to the list, I want to flag something for you now. Around the 9-minute mark, I'm going to tell you about one food, a food that more than 90% of Americans over 50 are not getting enough of. That contains the single most important brain nutrient most aging adults have been silently deficient in for years. The food that contains the most of it is one that millions of people over 70 stopped eating on their doctor's advice. The advice has since been formally retracted. But the behavior it created in an entire generation has not changed. That piece of information is one of the most important things I can tell you today, and I want you to stay for it. After 30 years in geriatric medicine, I have watched diet be consistently underestimated as a clinical tool. The right foods, eaten with some consistency, for the specific biology of aging. That is not a lifestyle recommendation. That is medicine. And it is medicine most people were never prescribed. But before the list, I need you to understand what is happening inside the body after 70 that makes these foods specifically powerful. Because the mechanism is the thing that will make each food make sense. Imagine your body as a factory that has been running for 7 decades. The factory is still open. The machinery for repair, for renewal, for resisting decline, it is all still there. But it depends on specific raw materials that it cannot manufacture on its own. It depends on compounds that have to arrive from food. And if those compounds have been absent or insufficient for years, if the factory has been running on stripped, simplified inputs, what we call aging is often not the inevitable consequence of time. It is the consequence of a factory running on the wrong fuel. 3 systems in particular shift significantly after 70. First, your gut microbiome. The community of bacteria living in your digestive tract, the ones that govern inflammation, immunity, neurotransmitter production, and brain chemistry, has lost a significant amount of diversity by this stage. A 2025 landmark analysis identified gut microbiome diversity as one of the single strongest predictors of healthy aging outcomes. Lower diversity means higher baseline inflammation, slower immune response, and a gut-brain communication channel that is transmitting more distress signals than repair ones. Most of the 10 foods on today's list directly feed the bacteria that reverse this. Second, your brain's inflammation management system. After 70, the brain's resident immune cells, called microglia, have become increasingly reactive. They were designed to clear debris and protect neural tissue. But with age and chronic low-level inflammation, they begin attacking healthy tissue alongside damaged tissue. Researchers call this neuroinflammatory drift. Specific compounds in plants and fish, polyphenols, flavonoids, omega-3 fatty acids, cross the blood-brain barrier and directly calm this process. They interrupt the inflammation at its source. Third, muscle loss. After 70, sarcopenia, the progressive erosion of muscle mass, accelerates to between 3% and 8% per decade without active dietary intervention. Several foods on today's list contain specific compounds that slow this at the cellular level, independently of protein content alone. Now I want to tell you what was happening inside Arthur's body, because the mechanism explains why the changes worked as quickly as they did. Your gut and your brain maintain a two-way communication line called the vagus nerve, a long, branching nerve that connects the base of the brain to the abdominal organs and carries signals in both directions constantly. When the bacteria in your gut shift toward the wrong species, or when the gut wall becomes more permeable with age, which it does progressively, inflammatory compounds slip through into the bloodstream. Your immune system fires a response. That inflammatory signal travels through the blood and through the vagus nerve directly into the brain. The fog Arthur felt was not happening in his brain. It was starting in his gut, and his gut was being fed 3 times a day, a diet that contained almost nothing capable of rebuilding it. Does this sound like something that might be happening to you? The fatigue, the fog, the aching that arrived without warning and stayed. When did you last think about what your gut was getting to work with? Now let me tell you Arthur's story, and what was in that refrigerator when we actually looked at it together. Arthur arrived in my office with his son in early spring. He was well-dressed, articulate, clearly sharp underneath the fog he described. The kind of patient whose difficulty finding words in conversation is particularly alarming because you can sense how precise those words once were. His previous testing had ruled out everything obvious. He handed me a 2-day food log he had written out the night before. Breakfast, day 1, instant oatmeal with a teaspoon of sugar, 1 slice of white toast with margarine, a glass of orange juice. Lunch, half a can of chicken noodle soup, saltine crackers, applesauce. Dinner, 1 chicken breast, boiled, he noted, with white rice and margarine. He had eaten this way, with minor variations, for 2 years. He had eliminated eggs because of cholesterol. He had eliminated fatty fish because the smell bothered him. He had eliminated leafy greens because he had read somewhere, he could not remember where, that they could interfere with his blood thinner. He had eliminated berries because they seemed acidic and he wasn't sure about his stomach. He had built, with genuine care and good intentions, a diet with almost 0 polyphenols, 0 omega-3 fats, 0 fermented bacteria, 0 choline, and almost no phytonutrient diversity. I ran an inflammatory panel. His C-reactive protein was elevated. His B12 was at the bottom of the reference range. His choline intake, calculated from his food log, was approximately 28% of what his brain requires to produce acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter most directly involved in memory. We made 10 changes. None of them were dramatic. All of them were specific. 4 months later, Arthur came back. He brought a small notebook. In it, he had written down words as they came back to him over the previous weeks. Words he had been reaching for and missing. Estuary, cacophony, deliberate. He had written them as they returned, one by one, like lights coming on in a house after a long outage. He set the notebook on the desk and looked at me the way someone looks when they are almost afraid to say something because it sounds too simple. "I feel like myself again," he said. "Here is what I promised you at the start, and I want you to understand why this matters before I give you the list. Choline is the raw material the brain uses to produce acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter for memory, attention, and cognitive processing. Without adequate choline, the brain begins extracting it from its own neural membranes. It dismantles structural tissue to maintain basic function. A 2019 study found that low choline intake was one of the strongest dietary predictors of cognitive decline in adults over 65. A 2022 analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that more than 90% of Americans over 50 do not meet the adequate intake for choline. The food that contains more choline per serving than almost any other food available is the egg. Arthur had been avoiding eggs for 11 years. His previous doctor, well-meaning, following the prevailing guidance of the time, had told him to limit them because of dietary cholesterol. The 2015 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee formally removed the daily cholesterol limit. The American Heart Association revised its position. The egg warning that shaped the diets of an entire generation of aging adults has been retracted. The eggs were never the problem. The absence of eggs and the choline they contain may have been. Your body has not failed you. Arthur's brain had not given up. His gut had not reached a point of no return. What he had, what you may have, is a diet that has been slowly drained of specific compounds that the body after 70 cannot do without. That is not permanent, and it is correctable faster than most people expect. Arthur's words came back in 4 months. His inflammatory markers normalized in 3. The factory was not broken. It was running on the wrong fuel. Here is the right fuel. The first superfood is blueberries. Eat them at least 4 times a week, every day if you can. Blueberries contain anthocyanins, the compounds responsible for their deep blue color. And these anthocyanins are small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier directly, where they reduce neuroinflammation and protect neural tissue from oxidative damage. A 2020 trial found that adults over 65 who consumed the equivalent of 1 cup of blueberries per day showed significantly better episodic memory scores after 16 weeks compared to placebo. Fresh, frozen, or freeze-dried, all forms retain the active compounds equally well. Half a cup over Greek yogurt in the morning. That is the starting point. The second superfood is fatty fish, salmon, sardines, or mackerel twice a week minimum. These are the most concentrated dietary sources of EPA and DHA, the omega-3 fatty acids that serve as the brain's structural raw material. After 70, the brain's capacity to synthesize these internally diminishes. A 2022 meta-analysis found that higher omega-3 intake was associated with a 26% lower risk of dementia in adults over 65. Fresh salmon, canned sardines and olive oil, smoked mackerel, all work. If cost is a concern, canned sardines are among the most nutritionally dense and affordable foods available anywhere. The third superfood is leafy greens, specifically spinach, kale, or arugula. 1 serving every day. The Mind Diet study from Rush University, which followed more than 900 adults for an average of 4.5 years, found that people who ate 1 or more servings of leafy greens daily had cognitive function equivalent to people 11 years younger. 11 years. The active compounds are vitamin K, lutein, folate, and beta-carotene, none of which appear in white bread or instant oatmeal. A large handful in eggs, a cup of spinach wilted into soup, a base for any meal. 1 serving, every day. And if you are on a blood thinner and have been told to avoid leafy greens, please discuss this specifically with your prescribing physician. The concern is about consistency of intake, not elimination, and many people on anticoagulants consume leafy greens safely with appropriate monitoring. The fourth superfood is walnuts. A small handful, about 30 grams, at least 4 times per week. Walnuts contain alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3, together with polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress in neural tissue directly. A 2020 randomized controlled trial found that 2 years of daily walnut consumption significantly slowed cognitive decline in adults identified as being at higher risk. They require no preparation, no cooking, and no planning. They go in anything. Eat them. The fifth superfood is fermented food. Kefir or plain yogurt with live cultures every single day. The gut-brain mechanism described earlier depends on microbial diversity, and fermented foods are the most direct way to begin rebuilding it. A 2021 Stanford clinical trial found that 8 weeks of daily fermented food intake increased microbiome diversity more than any high-fiber intervention tested. 1 cup of plain kefir in the morning or a serving of live culture yogurt every day. This is the lowest effort, highest impact gut change on this list. The sixth superfood is turmeric, always with black pepper. A 1/4 teaspoon at least 3 times per week in food or warm liquid. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, reduces beta-amyloid accumulation and neuroinflammation in multiple peer-reviewed trials. The critical detail, curcumin alone has very poor bioavailability. The body absorbs almost none of it without help. Black pepper contains piperine, which increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. The two must always be used together. Turmeric without black pepper is a pleasant spice. Turmeric with black pepper is a clinical intervention. The seventh superfood is extra virgin olive oil. 2 tablespoons daily as your primary fat for cooking and dressing. The Mind Diet and the Mediterranean Diet both identify extra virgin olive oil as among the most consistently protective dietary fats for the aging brain. It contains oleocanthal, a compound that in laboratory studies helps clear amyloid from neural tissue, and robust anti-inflammatory polyphenols. Replace margarine with it. Replace vegetable oil with it. Drizzle it over leafy greens, over eggs, over roasted vegetables. This single substitution made consistently has more research behind it than most supplements sold for brain health. The eighth superfood is eggs. 2 to 3 times per week, ideally more. For the choline. For the reason I told you Arthur's story, the cholesterol concern has been formally revised. The choline deficiency in people over 70 is real, documented, and consequential. 2 eggs at breakfast delivers approximately 300 milligrams of choline, roughly half the adequate intake for adults over 70, along with high-quality protein, vitamin D, and B12. Eat the whole egg. The choline is in the yolk. The ninth superfood is legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, at least 3 times per week. Legumes are simultaneously among the best plant protein sources and the most powerful prebiotic fibers available. They feed the gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which regulate inflammation throughout the body and protect the gut lining from the permeability that drives neuroinflammation. Half a cup of lentils stirred into soup, a can of chickpeas roasted with olive oil and turmeric and black pepper, which combines 3 items on this list in one preparation, 3 times a week. The 10th superfood is avocado, 2 to 3 times per week. Avocados provide monounsaturated fats that support cerebral blood flow alongside lutein, the same neuroprotective compound in leafy greens, and more potassium per gram than bananas. A 2021 randomized controlled trial found that 1 avocado per day significantly improved cognitive performance scores in healthy adults over 70 across a 12-week period compared to a control group. The fat content is not a concern. It is the point. It is what carries the lutein into the body where it can be absorbed and used. Arthur did not have a disease. He had a vacancy, a slow, steady removal of the specific compounds his brain and gut were waiting for, and his brain and body were declining into that vacancy. You may have one too, but now you know exactly what to put in it. When Arthur came back 4 months after we made these changes, he set that small notebook on the desk between us. The words he had written as they returned. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I thought I was just getting old." He wasn't. He was hungry, and he had not known what for. If you know someone over 70 who is eating carefully, doing their best, and still losing ground, still foggy, still tired, still watching their sharpness fade in ways they cannot explain, please share this with them today. None of the 10 foods on this list are expensive. None require a prescription. But most people eating the way Arthur was eating have never been told they existed as a category that matters. Before you do anything else today, I want you to do one thing. Go to your kitchen and open your refrigerator. Look inside and count how many distinct colors of actual food you see. Not packaging, not condiments. Actual food. Produce, fish, eggs, dairy, whatever is in there. Count the colors. Write the number down. What researchers have found is that the color diversity of your diet is one of the fastest and most reliable proxies for phytonutrient diversity, which correlates directly with microbiome diversity and with lower inflammatory markers in blood work. Most people over 70 who eat the way Arthur ate open their refrigerator and see 2 or 3 colors: beige, white, tan. Next week, I am going to show you what that number predicts about brain health over the next decade, and the specific low-cost strategy for adding 2 more colors per week starting tomorrow. That video goes live next week. Subscribe and turn the notification on. I do not want you to miss it. One final word before you go. Everything in this video is educational. It is not a substitute for your physician's guidance, particularly if you are managing a chronic condition, taking blood thinners, or on medications that may interact with specific foods. Please bring these ideas to your doctor. That conversation matters, and it belongs in a medical office, not only in a YouTube comment section. Your body is individual, and it deserves individual care.